Hey guys, Redneck Mini 14 here. On today's episode of The Guns That Shaped Me, we're going to talk about my very first ever rifle that was mine. That is an actual firearm and not just a BB gun or an airsoft gun, but this is an actual .22 rifle. And that is my Marlin Model 49 DL. Now, there's really not a lot out there on the Model 49 DL. I'm not exactly 100% sure what years it was made. It might have been during the time of the Model 60. It might have been before. I'm not really sure when this model was made. But I can tell you it is a very similar rifle to the Marlin Model 60, of which I have two of. And the main difference is that instead of it having a full-length stock with a receiver that just fits into the stock, you actually have a full receiver and a fore-end and stock that's mounted to the receiver and the barrel assembly. But other than that, it's very similar in how it works. I mean, if you took this rifle apart, looked at the inside, and looked at the inside of a Model 60 or a 795 or a Model 70 or any of those guns, they are very similar in how they operate. So they're basically just different versions of the same action. The only difference is that this one, it really isn't all that well known. It was probably only made for a few years, but if you look at it, it's just a much fancier version. It's just a fancy, the engravings on the receiver here, and the jeweling on the bolt, and the checkering on the wood, and the nice walnut stock and fore-end. And this is a tube-fed semi-automatic. It does hold 18 plus 1, depending on if you load it with the bolt open or with it closed. You can either fit 17 or 18. With it closed, you should be able to fit 18, and then you can rack one in and load one. But there's a whole debate on how safe that is. I don't do the whole plus one thing. I just load it and then shoot it. So anyway, the whole significance of this particular rifle is that, I was 16, 17 at the time. I guess I was 17 at this point. And, I had my BB gun. My uncle gave me a Winchester Model 12, which I've already showed. And my mom gave me her 410 Springfield 944 shotgun. And my mom had that .22 pistol. These were really the only handful of guns that we had in the house. And my uncle one day gave my dad this Marlin Model 49 to give to me, which this rifle was actually a Christmas present that he got when he was a kid, probably younger than I was. I mean, he was probably like 10, 12, somewhere around there when he got this rifle. And he said that it actually had one of those little teeny tiny, real thin .22 scopes that aren't really worth a crap. And he said that when he was young and he would take this gun out shooting, that scope wasn't very accurate, and so he actually took it off, and he used this rifle for rabbit hunting. They would take a beagle, or maybe even a couple beagles, and they would spook up the rabbits, and then they would take their .22 rifles like this and shoot the rabbits. And so that's what he used this particular rifle for. I don't believe he ever used this for squirrels. He had a 1022 that he got later on that he used for squirrels, with a scope on it and everything. But anyway, he never really used this gun when he got to, when he was an adult and everything. So he passed this gun on to me. So he gave it to my dad to give to me, and I came home from, I don't even know where I was, late one night, and my dad was just laying on the floor, and he had this rifle with him, and he said, "Here, this is a present from your uncle." And I was like, "That's awesome." And I didn't really know anything about Marlin. I had actually never heard of Marlin. I didn't, it wasn't like Winchester or what other like big, like Remington, like, these big names, Springfield. And the only reason I ever heard of Ruger was because of my mom's pistol. So, Marlin this was the first time I had ever heard of Marlin. I didn't really know anything about them. And, back then I didn't really like look up different models of guns like I do today and like, make a list of all the guns that I really want. So this is the first .22 rifle that I ever owned. So I took it, I would take this rifle out with my two shotguns and my mom's pistol, and we would take it to, there's this like unmanned gun range, probably 20 miles away from where I live, where it's just like all back roads to get there. And it's like in the middle of a national forest, but I would take this rifle out and shoot it there. I took it out and shot it at like the farm and, stuff like that. But, later on when I got newer .22 rifles, I really just didn't shoot this one much. And like with all my other family heirloom guns, I didn't really want to mess it up too much. I mean, like, if you look at it, it's got some pretty crappy bluing. I'm not sure how well this will come across, but it definitely, it could stand to be re-blued. I just try to keep it nice and oiled, and I think, it's got a little bit of surface rust on it. I'll try to get that off before I put it in the safe. But this rifle, it sits in the back of the safe at this point, and it actually I have to take quite a few guns out to get to it. But, and I don't even think I have any shooting videos with this. I really need to get this one out again and shoot it. But, like I said, this was the very first .22 rifle I ever had, and it really paved the way for me liking Marlins and just .22 rifles in general, especially semi-automatics. Because if you look at all my .22s, like the vast majority of them are semi-automatics, whether they're either rifles or pistols. But the other thing that this paved the way for, and this is going to sound a little strange, is that this actually paved the way for me liking lever action, Marlin lever action rifles. Now, the reason for that is back in the day when I first got this rifle, I was dating this girl, this is in high school, and her, she and her father were big into guns and shooting, and, they had Ruger Mark IIs and Blackhawks and AR-15s and FN FALs and all these kind of things. And I remember one day that I went to their house, and her father was just coming back from sighting in his deer rifle, and what he had was a Winchester Model 94. And I didn't really know much about the different models of lever actions back then, but I just really liked lever actions from my Rough Rider BB gun. I always thought that it was a classic, cowboy rifle. That's really all I knew about lever actions back then. And I saw he had a lever action rifle, and I was like, I want to get me one of those someday. And he looked at me and he says, "Get a Marlin, because they eject from the side as opposed to the top." And this was something I never really thought about. And what he said was, it will look like your .22 rifle, the Marlin 49, only it's a lever action and not a semi-automatic. And now I think what he was really talking about was the Marlin 39A, which is still a rifle that I would really love to get someday. But he's right. I mean, it does resemble this, they have the same kind of lines. Of course, 39A, there's some differences with how the receiver is made, and it's actually a steel receiver. This is an aluminum receiver. and just the way that the bolt and everything is machined and just how it looks. So it is different, but you can tell that they're both Marlins just by looking at them. And you know, I ended up getting, you know, several Marlin lever action rifles and even Henry lever action rifles, which are very similar to the Marlins. And I really have to give credit to, you know, my ex-girlfriend's father, you know, all those years ago, who told me, you know, if you want a lever action, get a Marlin. And, you know, this rifle, which is what sparked him to say that to me, is, you know, just really paved the way for me getting all those different rifles later on in my gun buying career. So anyway, this is my Marlin 49 DL, and it was my first .22 rifle, my first rifle in general, and it really helped pave the way for me getting several of the guns in my collection that I have today. And that's really all I have to say about it. Just a really nice old .22 rifle, and you know, it's got a little bit of family history in it, and I don't plan on ever selling it.
Hey, before I go, I just thought I'd remind everybody that I do have a second channel called Redneck Off the Range. Over there, I post most of my non-gun related content, so whether it's a video on my new tractor, my power tools, my projects that I'm working on, maybe wild game recipes, or just a random vlog, I post all of this kind of content over on my secondary channel. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go check it out, Redneck Off the Range. But that's all for this video, so subscribe to my channel, like me on Facebook. I'm Redneck Mini 14, and until next time, be safe.